Hi, listeners. Happy Friday. We've made it to the end of another week. I'm Audible editor Katie O'Connor, and I am so excited to be speaking with Rachel Hollis today, author and entrepreneur, about her latest book, Didn't See That Coming. We are going to be joined by Rachel in just a few moments here, and I'm going to have a few questions for Rachel to kick things off, and then we are going to move on over to your listener questions. So please put them in the chat, and we will get to you towards the end. So I'm going to add Rachel in now. Bear with me. Yeah, I think she's coming on. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So nice to see you again. Happy Friday.
And to you, we made it. We survived another week.
That's what I said. I was like, oh my gosh, every week feels like a victory right now, right?
Amen.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to be chatting with you about Didn't See That Coming, which feels like the unofficial motto for 2020 at this point.
Right.
And I mean, your book was in the works well before the pandemic, had been planned, and then obviously came out at a really critical time for so many people. And there are so many people right now that are walking through grief, sometimes, some of them for the first time in their lives. And you really tackle how to handle life's difficult moments in this book. And it's a very personal book, and you get us there through your own personal experiences. And I was curious if, because it is so personal, did that change your approach to writing or the narration of it?
Well, yeah. So I'll tell you, my next book was finished, but I actually stopped editing that book and wrote this one in pandemic. So wow. So I started this in March. Yeah. And just because I felt like, I tend to write with a lot of irreverence and humor. And as I was editing, I just felt like this was the wrong conversation. It felt so tone deaf to what was going on in the world, and everyone had so much fear, and it felt like we were all in crisis mode. And so I wanted to just speak to that. I wanted to talk about what we were all dealing with. And it was certainly, it just was a wild creative process to kind of write about something while you're inside of it. And then in the midst of writing that, I went through a personal crisis, and that my marriage ended. And so truly, for the first time in my career as an author, I found myself, faced with a decision of, do I want to talk about this really hard thing that I am currently inside of? Because as a communicator, I have only ever shared stories about things from my past. Like, I've only talked about what I've already gone through, and hey, here's some ideas that might help you because they helped me. That's kind of my approach. And so this was the first time that I was like, I'm walking through something. I don't have all the answers, but it felt like the most authentic way for me to show up is to just keep doing the work. So this book has a really unique perspective in that it was written both inside and outside of pain. Yeah. And I think that you hear that in the Audible version. I cried through the last chapter that I was like, man, can you even understand what I'm saying? And the producer, I remember, who was doing it, was like, no, we're keeping this. Like, this is real, and we want this version. So it was hard, but I am hopeful that it was helpful to people.
Yeah, I mean, that last chapter, I was crying right along with you. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody that maybe hasn't finished listening yet, but just thank you for your vulnerability with that. I think it was just so powerful, and I'm sure helped a lot of people. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your chapter called Letting Go of Guilt, I'm going to read a quote from the end of it. You closed with, "I cannot hurt myself to spare other people discomfort, and I refuse to feel guilty to be unwilling to do so." I feel like that's a trap that so many women fall into. We are constantly hurting ourselves to make other people around us feel more comfortable. So can you talk a bit more about that mental shift and how you got there?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I think this shows up in so many ways. Even before, prior to COVID, one of the biggest things affecting women was burnout. It was a
Mm-hmm.
conversation I would get emails and DMs about all the time. We saw in studies, you saw that like on the rise, women who would feel so overwhelmed, maybe men too, but I tend to work with women, that, you know, they just would feel so overwhelmed. They would feel like they were pouring out from an empty cup. They were depleted. They were miserable in their lives. And they would, you know, send me notes. They're like, I love my kids. I love my partner, but I don't have anything left to give. Is this
Yeah.
the life that I'm about to live for the next 50, 60 years? And I think a big reason that that happens to us is because we are taught that to be good, to be a good woman, is to be good for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a good mama, if you're a good wife, if you're a good daughter, then you're good. And when we try and do things for ourselves, many times we're called selfish.
Right.
You know, that I was interviewing someone for my podcast recently, and we're talking about the word selfish. And he was saying, so what's the alternative then? That you were supposed to go through your entire life and be selfless? Like, don't care about yourself at all. Don't take care of yourself at all. Don't reach for anything that makes you happy. This is not how we're meant to function. And in fact, I think that if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't fight for what you need, what will make you healthy, what will make you strong, then you are not going to be able to take care of anyone else or love them well or show up as a mama or a leader in business or whatever your personal values are. So the shift for me was not fast. It was very slow, and it has happened over many years. And it was just sort of like looking for areas in life where I'm like, man, I think of like years ago, I really wanted time to write. You know, I think when I wrote my first book, I think I had 2 children at the time. And I did what a lot of people do, which is I didn't want to make anyone else around me uncomfortable. I didn't want to make my kids have a harder time. I didn't want to make my partner have a harder time. And so I would get up at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, I would find time to write before everybody woke up. And I remember thinking, I've told that story a million times, and I'm thinking like, look at me, like I'm getting it all done. And in retrospect, I realized how even that choice was very unhealthy, because I didn't feel like I could say to my husband at the time, I would like 2 hours.
Right.
I would like 2 hours for myself to go work on this creative thing. And even if you don't understand it, and even if you think it's silly, I would like this time for myself. And there are ways that you can navigate that together, where you say, hey, I'm going to go do 2 hours, and I'm going to go write down at the coffee shop. And then you go take 2 hours and you go golfing or you hang out with your friends. But I didn't even have the audacity, right? I didn't even have that.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't even know that I was allowed to. And I think a lot of women really struggle with feeling like their hopes, their dreams, even their health. The amount of women who are like, oh, I really want to find time to run, or I really love to do, I want to go find time to be with a therapist, like just things to take care of them. They're like, but, you know, my husband doesn't want to have to watch the baby. And I'm like, what is going on? So if you're watching this and you struggle with that, I just want to tell you, you are not alone. And it takes a while. And it's not like, at least for me, it wasn't flipping a switch. It was just slowly kind of inching into, okay, I'm gonna ask for this for myself. And the world didn't explode, and my children are fine, and my partner is fine, and okay, great. And then now I'm going to ask for this thing too. So, it's a process for sure.
And I mean, especially now, it's more critical than ever to be asking for that time for yourself to take care of what you need to take care of in order to show up for the people in your life that are there all the time now and have been there all the time for the last several months. And I know in one of your books, I think it was Girl Wash Your Face. I mean, you are still an advocate of getting up early and sort of starting your day by yourself and having that time. But you do acknowledge, like, if you have babies, if you have toddlers, forget it.
Yes.
Just
Like,
get
this
your
is
sleep,
not the
get your rest.
season. Yes.
Yeah.
And I really do think that in life we have seasons, right? That there are seasons where you're going to hustle and you're going to go and you're going to pursue the dreams. And then there are seasons where maybe you are a new mom or you're a senior in college and you're trying to finish everything up. And you really cannot have everything all at the same time. So there's an old quote that says, you can have it all. You can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time or in the same increments, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you just have to be graceful with yourself about what you can take on in a given season. And if this is the one where you're going to sprint, unapologetically run as hard as you can.
Yeah.
And if this is a season where you're breastfeeding a 2-month-old,
forget it.
Good for you. You're keeping a human alive. That's all you need to do today.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned and didn't see that coming that people who have lost loved ones can often associate that loss with a holiday or an event. And I find that my family, and myself included, we actually split time itself into the before and the after. You look at a wedding, oh, I can't believe so-and-so's been gone for a month. Or you think about a vacation and, oh, I can't believe that, they would have been gone a year after that trip. So what are some easy ways to keep memories alive, but not have the absence dominate all of your memories?
Well, I think, the example that I use in the book is I lost my older brother to suicide when I was 14, and I'm 37 now. And I can tell you that grief is an evolution. It changes over time. There have been periods in my life where the grief of that loss was debilitating. And there are periods of time where it feels okay. And I can tell you that I always and will always miss my brother. Always. And there are moments, like big life events, on my wedding day, I was devastated that he wasn't there, those sort of big things. But what I've learned to do over time is to really celebrate the people that we've lost, to celebrate their life every day. I forget which day, I think it's coming up, but Dia de los Muertos is happening. And I think, in Mexican culture, they do this so beautifully where they really celebrate the people that they've lost. And they bring them into family culture and events and experiences. And it's like they're still there. Whereas I think sometimes there are those of us who we hide the pictures. We can't see those things because it makes it too painful. And I really have discovered that if I surround myself with things that represent the life of that person to me, not obsessing over the loss, but really focusing on celebrating the life. I told this story recently to my girlfriends. I have 2 things from my big brother, two pieces of, 2 things that were his. I have a ring that was his, and I have this old t-shirt, was his favorite t-shirt. And, it's been 23 years. So this is an old shirt and it looks old. And for the longest time, I kept that ring and that shirt folded up, and put in a box, in plastic wrap, in a box, as I was so afraid of something happening to them. And I would, every once in a while when I was feeling sad, I would go in and I would take out those things and I would hold them. And I don't even know what shifted it for me. But one day I was just like, this is not a celebration of who he was. And I took out the t-shirt and I took out the ring and I wear them all the time. And I was 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it's been pretty recent, right before the book came out. I was going to say ironically, but I don't believe in coincidence. I was making a green smoothie. I make a disgusting green smoothie every single day. And I was opening a new jar of almond butter and I was wearing my brother's shirt. I was opening a new jar of almond butter. And when I opened it, there was almond oil kind of at the top. It was natural butter and it spilled all over the front of the shirt, and it's oil.
Yeah.
So as soon as it hits the shirt, I'm I gasp, and my kids are like, Mom, what's wrong? They thought I hurt myself. And I was so upset. Because I knew it's ruined.
Yeah.
And almost immediately I could hear the sound of my brother laughing at me in my head. Like, I just imagined him there. Like, what would Ryan do if he was standing here? If he was standing here, he'd be laughing at me. He'd be like, oh, sis, you're a klutz. Like, you still don't have any grace. You're still, you know, like a bull in a china shop. And I just thought, like, if you're going to cry over this thing, if you're going to feel like better to have worn it, better to have lived, and let that shirt be a representation of the fact that I'm still living with what it is instead of hiding it away in a closet. And that moment, I was like, man, this grief is such an evolution, because years ago, were that to happen, I would have been in the floor.
Yeah.
Because I would have believed that I had just destroyed this memory of my brother. And what I understand now is, like, that memory can't be destroyed, but it can be grown. It can become something else. It can be this beautiful thing that continues to happen, instead of, you know, oh, I'm going to, like, this is, you were saying before and after, like, okay, we had this loss and now forever I'm going to live with this loss. No, I'm not going to live with the loss of my brother for the rest of my life. I'm going to live celebrating my brother's life for the rest of my life.
That's beautiful. And I think it's really helpful too. You know, I lost my father about 5.5 years ago, and I feel like evolution's a great word. It's very nonlinear, and it's also good too to have people in your life that when you can't do that work to sort of keep that memory alive, that then they can kind of step in and do that for you. But yeah, I've got a great little sweater that I love to. I love that. Sometimes. So you also mentioned in the book the need to provide stability for your children. Speaking of your children in that moment, sort of watching you with the oil spill.
Almond butter.
Yeah. And to not break down in front of them. But I'm curious, how do you balance that with wanting to show kids that it is okay to be vulnerable and it is okay to cry, you know, when you were feeling those emotions?
Well, I don't know if this is what a child psychologist would say. I really base this off of what I wish I had had when I was little. And so I did have parents who cried in front of me. I did have parents who asked me to handle things I shouldn't have been handling at a very early age. And so I don't believe that it is appropriate for my kids to see me processing a pain that they are also feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I want them to know, I'm just going off my own experience, that when my own parents got divorced and my mom was crying and so upset, and I understand why.
Yeah.
But then as a little girl, I felt like I'm not supposed to cry. I'm supposed to help her to stop crying. Mm. And so what I want my children to know, because they have cried many times over our breakup, and I want them to know that I'm a safe space and I'm a strong space for them to be able to process emotion without me getting emotional with them. And so they absolutely have seen me cry over things that don't affect them, if that makes sense. So like if, you know, I'm trying to think of, you know, inside of COVID, I had to do layoffs at my company. And it was devastating for me. And I fought for months and months and months to try and keep that from happening. But we were a company that did, most of our revenue came from live events, and we can't do live events. And so it was very sad. And they saw me process that. And I explained to them what that felt like. You know, these people have families, and, you know, I took that responsibility very seriously, and I'm going to do everything in my power to work to a place that we could hire them back again. But I'm having a hard day. And so they're able to see what that looks like, but also it's not something that affects them personally. So I don't know if a child psychologist would agree, but that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's fair too, especially also as you're looking at a co-parenting relationship. You know, you don't want to be processing an emotion that then they take out on your partner.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
You want that to be a healthy balance too. Speaking of the Hollis company, you know, in your book, you talk about having to be agile during the pandemic. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that with your group. How do you keep your team motivated in the face of that, you know, while you are still trying to plug away with what you can do?
Right. Well, I feel like it's a few things. It's one, we openly communicated the entire time with our whole staff, and we work with some of the smartest, most incredible people ever. So I don't think anyone was shocked, like, oh, half our revenue went away. We're going to have to figure this out.
Yeah.
So we were very honest. I think that, when someone doesn't know something's coming, I mean, I just realized that's the name of the book, which sounds so lame. I was not trying to make it match up, but, when things are a surprise, they're so much more painful. So one, really being open about what it is, because I think what kills morale is when when you have no idea what's going on and you're working so hard and you're blindsided. So it was one, like being open and honest about it. And two, with that remaining group of people to just be like, okay, we have work to do. We have a mission. Our mission did not change. Our heart for this community did not change. We still are doing incredible things in this world. We have to continue to do this work. I just had a meeting before I was hanging out with you, and we're launching this a big product collection on Monday. It's something we've been working on forever. And we're talking about how excited we are. And this team has just busted their butts to get it out into the world. And with this collection, it's a curated collection of 3 different small businesses that I really love, and things that are ethically sourced and employ missional hires, people who are transitioning out of homelessness, prostitution, drug addiction. Like, it is my heart in product form. Yeah. And we were just like, my head of product was just bawling. She was like, we placed this order for this product, which then allows them to hire more people, and it allows them more runway. And now, so it's like, it is something, the motivation is because the work we are doing affects more than just us. Yeah. It affects our community, the people who have been with us forever. And it also affects the partners and the vendors and these small businesses that we get to work with. So I think it's that. I think it's like, if your heart's there and you express that to your team, that's the why. Right? I mean, that's the how everyone stays motivated, is because they know what this is for. Yeah. That's great. And I think that's such a rewarding part of the work that you guys are doing. You're a big proponent of habits and creating good habits, and how if you have good habits in place, when a difficult season comes along, it can really help boost you out of it. I have struggled to maintain my good habits during this pandemic. Yes, so many people have. It's been rough, and particularly as, new responsibilities come in throughout it, like some of the habits just fall off. Mm-hmm. Were there any habits that you had to give up temporarily, or reshift your priorities? Well, so I did struggle a bit. I have, it's interesting because they're products of mine, but I have a journal and a planner. That's a big part of the products that I put out in the world. And what that journal is you're setting daily goals, but it's all based on where you want to be in a decade. Mm-hmm. And to be totally honest, I really struggled. I've been doing that work for years and years and years, but I really struggled with my journal in the first couple of months of COVID, because I was like, I'm supposed to imagine a decade in the future. Like, I don't even know where we're going to be in 4 months. So I really struggled with that. And what I actually found to sort of work around was, I was like, okay, I'm going to change this journal to, where do I want to be in 6 weeks? Where do I want to be as a mom, as a husband, like as a person, like all of these things, because those were things that I could affect in the life that I had. So I don't know that I gave up habits as much as I definitely had to pivot how those habits showed up for me. Yeah. Because I just know I know the result of it. I was watching, do you know, is it Jim Quick who does Limitless, which has got to be a popular Audible book. It's all about what you need to sort of be motivated. And I was watching a video with him where he was talking about purpose, and we've all heard about purpose and knowing your why and whatever, but I actually loved how he explained it, because he was like, sometimes the purpose is not this grandiose, like, I'm going to save the world. Sometimes the purpose is like, I'm doing this thing right now because later I'm not going to have to do it. Or I'm doing this thing right now because I'm going to save money, right? Like it doesn't always, the motivation to like do the thing isn't always because of something big and wild and amazing. And so for me, my habits are because I know if I don't do them, I'm not going to feel as good.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have the energy. I'm not going to be able to do this work, to be a leader, to be the mom I want to be. And so it's kind of going back to like, what's the purpose of you keeping that habit? And I would also say, just start with one.
Yeah.
Just start with one. Maybe you be very graceful with yourself and you've let some things go inside of the world that we're living in, which nobody knows how to deal with. So maybe you're just like, what's one thing that I can add back in starting today that just makes me feel better?
Yeah.
Whether it's something that makes you happy, something that makes you thrive, but just one thing, and just start doing that consistently. And a month from now, add in one more. Because I think what throws us off is that we try and jump back into everything. It's kind of like New Year's Day. We're like, okay, I'm back on the bandwagon.
New me. Yeah.
Right. And it's too intense and there's too much going on, but just adding one thing can really help.
Thank you so much. That's it for my questions. Our social team has sent me some questions from our listeners who have been joining us. Hannah wants to know, how do you handle writer's block?
Oh my gosh. I don't really get writer's block, Hannah. Honestly, I'm not just blowing smoke. Actually just did a podcast episode about how to write a book, and it was like all of my tips. If you guys want to go listen to it, it's only a couple weeks old, so you could easily find it. But one of the things that I talk about, and I cannot remember what author told me this, but someone years ago told me to leave myself breadcrumbs. So they would say, when you're writing, and you know what you're getting towards the end of your session, and you know what the next, like, you know where you're going with this character, with this moment or this paragraph, stop.
Yeah.
So don't write until you don't know anything. Write until you know what's coming next, and then leave for the day. And then when you come back tomorrow, you've got energy again, you know, your brain's sort of renewed and you're refreshed. And then you already know where you're going to go, and you just go. I would also truly what it is. They're like, wait, should it be that? Should it be? I'm like, this is all Oh, wait, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry.
It's okay.
I just allow my first draft to suck. I write as fast as I can. I don't overthink it. And I think that's why people get stuck, is because they're trying to make it great that first time out.
Yeah. Maisie wants to know, do you think you can fast track grief by listening to books like this one, or do you just have to go through it and these tools simply help the journey, whatever that looks like?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think there's a fast path to grief. Well, let me say it differently. There for sure is, but you're going to encounter the ramifications of that later. I think you have to walk through it. And the faster that you walk through it, the faster that you're willing to feel it and allow yourself to process, the faster you will get to healing. When we try and numb it, you know, when we try and ignore it, when we try and get really busy so we don't have to think about it, that's when we actually make it drag out longer.
Yeah. Amy wants to know, what is the best advice you've received from a parent or close family member?
What is the best? Gosh. Honestly, what I just thought, or I can hear my grandpa's voice in my head saying, even the dumbest farmhand knows to work in the shade. Which was just his way of saying, like, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
I have a lot of grandpa, you know, witticisms stored up here, but that's the one that popped into my head. And I hear it all the time when I'm doing something and making it way harder than it needs to be, either because I'm overthinking or because I'm literally physically doing something that's harder than it needs to be. I can just hear grandpa being like, girl, even the dumbest farmhand knows to work in the shade.
That's great. I want to keep that one. When we met in 2019, you gave me so many good romance book recommendations, and you are responsible for my Discovery of Witches rabbit hole. And as a romance book author yourself, I have to know if you have any new recommendations.
What have I read recently? Well, I'm going to be honest. Once I broke up with my husband. I have not been able to read romance
didn't
yet.
want it so much, yeah.
Right. Maybe
Give it
someday,
time.
but right now I haven't. But I'm sure that I've read something. I've honestly been reading a ton of nonfiction this year. I've been reading a ton of memoirs, just things about how to navigate. Like when we first split up, I read so many books on how to parent my kids during a hard season. I really want to give you at least one. I feel like I've read one fiction book, haven't I?
It's okay. I can bother you
Dang
later,
it.
too.
Yes. By the time the next book comes out, I feel like I'll be reading romance.
You'll be
again.
ready.
I'll have a recommendation for you. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rachel. I appreciate it so much. And thank you, listeners, for joining us here. You can listen to Didn't See That Coming on audible.com.
Thank you. You guys have a good weekend.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.